Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you for being on this call, and thank you to anyone who is clicking on to listen to this conversation. My name is Emilia, and I am working under the name of HONUA, and part of the work that I want to put out includes doing interviews like this, where we can kind of think a little bit more deeply about the times that we're living in and the things that we want to nurture in our lives, and how we want to create community more intentionally. So I'm really, really excited that that Auntie Aʻiaʻi, Kumu Aʻiaʻi has made the time to have a conversation about some of the things that are going on specifically around COVID-19 and the response that we're having locally and globally to the pandemic. So if you want to introduce yourself and share a little bit about the work that you do and why this is meaningful to you.
Oh, aloha mai, Amelia. Mahalo nui. Yeah, I'm Aʻiaʻi Bello, also known as Reni, my birth name. And I've been working in the area of healing arts and my spiritual work for the better part of my life. So going on like 40-something years right now. And in this time, I've learned so much, but I realized that everything that I learned was preparing me for the now, for these very moments. And you know, whereas some people think that we're in crisis, other people think this is the end of the world. I think this is the most exciting time in my life. In the 60-something years of my life, this is the most exciting time now. We are actually seeing humanity rebirth into unity. So anyway, I live in Wahiawa, the island of Oahu, and I was raised here, born in Kalihi. But I also was able to and very blessed to spend 15 years abroad in Spain, in Europe, in particular in Spain. And then I came home. And during the time I was in Spain, I realized that there were certain gifts that I had of seeing and healing. And so I have pursued that. I have 2 children who are now grown up. They have families of their own. And so now I'm on my own, and I have all the time in the world to rededicate to this aspect of my life. Everything kind of got put on hold when I was having my kids, but I'm really excited to be able to address COVID. And the reason is because I hear so many things from other people and in the news. And and when I see people panicking and so worried, and I'm like, wait, stop. And so I'm really grateful to have an opportunity to express and to address it from what I understand. Because like I said, this is the most exciting time of my life, of the last, 64 years. And so.
Awesome. Yeah, because I want to have, you know, we have some specific things that we really want to make sure that we talk about. And also kind of want to give a little bit of fluidity too, because, you know, even as we're talking about the pandemic specifically, it's connected to so many other things. And so I kind of want to start by just kind of contextualizing, like, what, you know, from your perspective, how does the pandemic and everything that's happening now with COVID-19 kind of fit into this bigger picture of human evolution and the time that we're at now?
Wow, that's a power-packed question. You know, human evolution, it's ongoing, right? And it always has been, but humanity has been fast approaching this crucial point. And it's not the end of the world, but it is a crucial turning point. It's a hinge point for us, for this particular dispensation of humanity, for those of us who reside here now, or who have been part of humanity up to now. You know, everything in the universe in consistent motion. There's always motion. Energy is always moving. And I come from the pretext that everything is energy. And so energy is always moving and it's changing and it's diverse. It follows patterns, and sometimes the patterns shift and sometimes it changes. But COVID is kind of it's an expectation almost. If we look at the prophecy that there has been prior to this, you know, about the times. I belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I believe in prophecy and visions, because I started having visions when I was in my late teens, early 20s, and you know, to be able to understand and to start to delve into them. And so not only in the church, but outside through the years, the great seers and prophets have predicted a time where humanity, you know, and this is cyclical, like all the other changes. And so we do one cycle and we end that cycle. And at the same time we end that, we're actually starting a new cycle. And so, you know, for when Emily probably wasn't even born, but for us, when I was in high school, it was the age of Aquarius, you know, and as a person who has studied spiritual astrology for many, many years, it is a literal, you know, prior to the age of Aquarius, we were in the age of Pisces, and that is the age of Christ. He was the fisherman of the men. That is when things were differentiated. That is like post-Atlantic is the Piscean age, you know, and now we're in the age of Aquarius. We clearly are there. You know, for the longest time, we were kind of at that borderline. And it was like, when are we going to get there? When are we going to get there? Is it really happening? Is the alignment there in you know, in the heavens? And it is. We are definitely on the other side. But, you know, these kinds of changes and transitions don't happen in a particular year. Like it didn't happen in the year 2000 or 2001. It happens over a bigger period of time. But there are so many indications that we already are. And so COVID, the Korean nuclear crisis, all these things that seem like crisis, possibilities of war, society, and specifically American society in decline. Because, you know, after having lived abroad, you realize how close the country, the US is, that everybody lives in their own comfortable little bubble, and they make believe that the really bad bubbles don't exist. And they just live like that. Whereas, you know, I was going into fascist Spain that had been closed for 40 years, where you could just be going window shopping and end up in the hospital from the civil guard. And that opened my eyes to a lot of things. And so COVID is an opportunity. I know that humanity right now is being rebirthed into unity. It's kind of like when you travel in astrology, you have your Saturn, and Saturn has the rings, right? So in your first Saturn voyage, you're headed out to the rings to see what's out there. Then on your second Saturn return, it begins to become an internal journey. So instead of external pushing outward, it becomes internal, because really we are both. And so humanity is being rebirthed into unity. And one of the biggest prophecies that herald that, it was the Lord's Prayer, which has been used again and again and again. And, you know, I don't mean to be going off. Those of you who don't get offended because I speak religion. Spirituality is way broader and it umbrellas that. But there are these markers, and people associate religion with spiritual.
And there are multiple markers. Yeah, there are multiple markers in other cultures and other prophecies.
Yeah, you know, like we have the Mayan calendar, you know.
Yeah.
And
similar
so I want
themes.
people to go off because I say something about that. I have no
Yeah.
qualms in saying that, but I do know that some people get very offended, and it's only because things have been forced down their throat.
Yeah.
But
So yeah,
you know,
we don't have to get stuck on the terminology so much as just the themes and the patterns that have been observed by cultures for thousands of years already. And
yeah, and so
you know,
when
and
we
how,
look at the decay in an existing society that was empowered, and when we understand that we have kind of neglected our spiritual connections for a long time because we have been denied our language, we have been denied our cultural access to our ceremony and to really understanding who we are. And we have all been raised in a Western world. I don't care what you tell me who you are. You know, maybe if you're in the deepest, darkest jungle out there in the Amazon or someplace, you weren't, but even now, by now you have been. And it's time for us to re-nurture certain relationships. And one of them is with Mother Earth and with the land. And the other one is with ourself, to understand ourself within, not just to look outwardly for everything. And I think that's, you know, so when we look at COVID, the COVID is just a sign of the time. It is that crumbling of the status quo. It is the crumbling of and the disempowerment of the powers that be to lay groundwork. You know, you cannot just keep building and bringing new things. When I was a child, just before Christmas, we didn't have shelves, or all we had was a box, a cardboard box that you put your toys in. And every year we had to clean out that box before Christmas. If not, we were told, you're not going to get any Christmas presents. And so we'd clean out our box and give it to Salvation Army, you know, and then we would have our new presents for Christmas, and then we could fill up our box again. And so that's kind of where we are. We're in this cleansing, but we're in this deep, deep cleansing, because we're cleansing and healing generations and generations of ancestral trauma. You know, if we look at the bigger picture, 2,000 years, 26,000 years, then we start looking at what we kind of understand to be cycles, not necessarily time. When
and it's how you're
time,
and like how you're saying too, because you know, I think it's really important to focus on that part about the fact that time is cyclical. And when we're talking about COVID-19 and trying to understand, you know, what it means and how to respond to it, really understanding that time is cyclical, and all the things that we haven't, all the lessons that haven't been learned personally or collectively are going to cycle again and again. And how you're saying, I mean, for people who aren't necessarily familiar with astrology terms and how, you know, how those metaphors, what those metaphors mean in real life, you know, the Saturn return is all about the structures of our life. It's about our boundaries. It's about the foundations that we're building from. And how you're saying that first Saturn return, which is about 29 years or so, that first Saturn return tends to be very external. You know, our material structures, our material foundations, and then that second cycle, that second Saturn return, is turning all of that inward. What are our spiritual foundations, and how are we, like how you said, you know, what is our, how are we feeding that, our spiritual connection, or reigniting that in a time like this, where it's really calling on us to do that, and return to the things that we've neglected, that have brought us so much disharmony and so much, you know, basically paved the way for something like COVID to happen.
yeah, and it's not either that we've allowed COVID to happen, you know, because Saturn isn't only about structure. Saturn is our cross to bear in life. Saturn is our biggest obstacle. In other words, it is our greatest lesson that we have to learn. And it's just how we work through it. So, you know, we're given the opportunity to work through it externally. And if we can, hey, that's fantastic, because your journey inward is incredible. But if you're still and you weren't successful, then maybe it's because the way to overcome it is the internalness, not the externalness of it. But yeah, we could do a whole nother talk on a Saturn return. But again, you know, I want to emphasize the cyclical. I mean, it's not like we haven't had plagues on the face of the earth and other kinds of things, and people have survived. You know, everybody jokes around, but there's going to be a lot of COVID babies because, you know, we're inbound.
It happens.
But we also know that those kinds of things happen when we are also going to lose a lot of people on this planet, like during the wars, during times where there is a lot of loss of life. And, you know, I was speaking with Emilia before, and we had talked about, you know, this understanding or the lack of ability for us to speak openly and to want to speak about death without seeming so morbid. And I think that understanding that, seeing it in its perspective, just like seeing COVID will come, has come, and COVID will end. And you know what? Humanity is still gonna be there because we're in this birthing process. Yeah, we're in this birthing process. So that's just like a bump. But this bump has impacted people in so many different ways. And that's why I wanted to speak on it, because, you know, from Hawaii, where we're kind of isolated, I hear about the riots and the people in the street and the looting and all of those things. And yet in Hawaii, I feel like our people, and also because prior to this, we were just up on Mauna Kea, that there is a consciousness that has been awakened in us. I have seen since COVID in Hawaii, I have seen people coming together to work together. I have seen people having a more intimate relationship with the land and understanding that the land does and will provide for us as long as we also do our part. I have been the recipient of many a kindness and courtesy calls to say, "Are you okay, Auntie?" You know, and that touches my heart. And people going out of their way to make sure that I have everything. And here I am sewing masks thinking I'm supposed to be helping everybody. And so, you know, I do my thing with prayer. And that's the other thing, is that society and the powers that be are addressing symptoms. They're looking at symptoms, just like how Western medicine looks more at symptoms, especially when they don't know the cause. Yeah. And for me, it's like, let's build immunity. Let's build health in a way that we are strong enough to ward off COVID. And with the understanding that COVID is coming at a time of social decay, when things crumble around us, it's very important that we strengthen ourselves internally. And so that's why the pule works. You know, my poor students, they come to me to learn chanting, Hawaiian chanting, and they end up being pushed into all these other situations. Like, we were just in prayer for 1 month straight, every single morning, all of us at 7:00 a.m. doing a series of prayer, because I had this vision that if I did that, we could clear Oahu, the island that we live on, and keep it safe. Well, it was so funny, because if you look at the graphics and the COVID curve, all of a sudden in May, it flattened. You know, they had kept talking about, we're trying to flatten the curve. Well, it went totally flat in Hawaii. But the thing is, we had committed to do it from May 1st to May 31st. And so come June, there were a lot of people who were no longer doing those pule. And even within the first week of the month, you saw a sharp rise in the cases of COVID. Now, you know, that can be due to many things, and you don't have to believe me if you don't want. And it's not even that, because we continue to pray because we know that it works. Yeah, so it's a time when we need to strengthen ourselves. And, you know, I see all these families who are running, and we all know that if you're physically fit, you have a better chance of resisting some kind of bug or virus or bacterial infection, whatever it might be, right? And then if you're not, then yes, you are more susceptible to the possibly getting it. And, you know, we have a lot of people with bronchial and lung problems. And they say that they are the most susceptible to COVID, and COVID because it seems to attack your lungs so that you can't breathe. And part of it, you know, everything with the lungs, it all has to do with our emotions, and they get stuck in there and it manifests. I had asthma as a teenager, and the minute I left home, I never had another asthma attack in my life. And so what does that say? You know, I believe even the doctor had told my mother that it's emotional. But it is something that we can control to a certain extent, you know, but we have to be willing to do the hard work. And it's hard to work through emotions because they're so overwhelming, you know, and that's another thing that one day I would like to address is, you know, love as we know it is not an emotion. An emotion is of a lower vibration. COVID is of a lower vibration. And so if through our pule and through our prayer and through our lifestyle and our daily practices, we are able to elevate our own personal frequency and vibration and hold it there, we will not get COVID. And we will not get COVID because a lower density vibration cannot exist in the same space as that higher vibration. And there's your vaccine right there, you know, rather than doing a rush scientific one that we don't know the secondary effects of and vaccinate the masses. Oh my goodness, that's scary. For me, that's a scary thought. You know, so the COVID in Hawaii has brought a lot of good things to people. It has continued our kapu aloha to each other, our kapu aloha to ourselves, that the Mauna triggered, and I don't want to say started because aloha has always existed, but it has forced us once again to turn to our kupuna, to turn to our traditional teachings, our traditional learnings, the knowledge that we have. And that's the other thing, that we are always looking for the out. You know, I speak often of the God within and the God without. We look at the things on the outside and we forgot that we, and especially as women, we are universes and we are complete. And that means we have complete knowledge, complete ike that we need. And the problem that we face is accessing that knowledge. How do we access that, you know? And so just the fact that we begin to turn inwardly and to look at those things, and that we understand that it's not just us, it's the aina, it's the other people, and then it is our attitude and our awareness of who we really are and what we can do about it.
Yeah. So there's so many things that, like, all the things that you're saying, they're kind of shooting off little things in my mind, and I'm thinking, you know, for one, you know, when you're saying, you know, love is not, we're talking about the emotional component of COVID, and how, you know, an illness that attacks your lungs is bringing our attention to, you know, what do we carry in our lungs? We carry grief, we carry sadness, we carry a lot of our emotion and our ability to kind of to take in the world. We carry that there. And so, you know, the kind of getting back to what you said earlier about the fact that, you know, as we're looking at time as cyclical and what it means for COVID to be happening at a time like this, you know, you said, you talked about intergenerational trauma and how we're processing that. And I feel like kind of putting those together in terms of how we're going to respond and fortify ourselves physically, you know, societally, emotionally, like that's the work, that's the intergenerational work. And that's us getting in touch with what are the emotions that are there that need to be processed all the way through, so that we're not vulnerable to things like COVID-19, and not vulnerable to damaging our relationships to the land, to ourselves, to each other. Like that's the bigger work. And, you know, when you talked about love and aloha in general, like these are not emotions. And I immediately thought of something my grandma told me like years ago, probably like 10 years ago already, 10, 12 years ago. she gave me this definition of love. She said, you know, love is not a feeling. Love is a commitment to treating a person in a particular way. And or treating one another, or treating ourselves. I kind of think of that more broadly, like, what is the commitment that I'm making in the way that I treat myself, and the way that I treat other people, and the way that I treat the land. And I feel like also, you know, that notion of where our commitments lie, and where our practices lie, and what we're actually feeding every day, that too is like another call that COVID is kind of making louder for me personally, and for, you know, us broadly. And the other thing I wanted to say was just about this, like, the, you know, the concept that you talk about a lot, which is being reborn into unity, that hoʻoulu hoʻokahi, you know, concept that, you know, as you were talking, it made me think, you know, so much of the fear that, you know, that you're talking about in people's response to COVID-19, I kind of feel like there's some parallels between just like the birthing experience in general, and I know you've done birth work for a long while now, and I wonder if you kind of also see a little bit of, you know, these parallels of, you know, the fear that comes up in the moments where you're not even sure if you can do this anymore. You know, you've got that, you know, the trajectory of what happens where you're like, you know, oh, like my water broke, and you know, it's gonna happen. I feel pretty good. Like, I think I can do this. And then you kind of progress into this, you know, you progress all the way through to the point where, you know, you feel like you really cannot do it anymore, and you're afraid, and you're literally at the door of death. The veil between life and death becomes so thin. But then you still, at the end of the day, you got to do it. It's got to happen. There's no like turning back. There's no like cancel button, control Z, you know. So yeah, I wonder if you think of it in that way too.
Oh, definitely. You know, fear, talk about a fear factor, you know, and it's fear of the unknown. It's fear that it's the answer that you didn't want to hear, that you know in your gut that it is. It's fear because, you know, we deep down inside, we know our potential. And we know when we are not living up to it, and we know what we're capable of on every level now, I'm thinking. And the fear always comes because we think we don't know, or the circumstances seem like it. You know, there's a fear factor here, and everything that is on a personal level is reflected in society and then out onto a global level. This is an opportunity for governments to work together and to come together instead of everybody doing their own thing. But it is also a question of trust.
Yeah.
Do we trust? Can we trust? I cannot trust a government who says, okay, we're going to do quarantine, but it is not enforced. So to me, that's as if it doesn't exist.
It's like, why bother? Yeah, why pretend?
But, you know, and so the fear factor is really prominent because we're going through enlightenment. And COVID is part of that process of enlightenment. Enlightenment is not this la-di-da state where everything is and you're in a Zen mode and everything is just calm and under control and you don't have to worry. Enlightenment is that constant struggle to breathe, to be present. It is the struggle to be in a situation that we're in and to think thrive mode rather than survive, because the powers that be are all thinking, how are we surviving this? And I wake up every morning and go to bed every night thinking we are thriving in the midst of COVID. And so, you know, it's like that glass of water, which this is such an old thing, but the glass of water is half empty, it's halfway filled. So if you haven't had water and you're dying of thirst, that is not enough by any means. If you have had your fill and you're totally hydrated, that's a lot of water. Yeah. And yet it doesn't change the quantity of water that's in the glass. And this is one of those situations. And so as we refocus and as we reflect, as we talk, as we move forward with this, You know, we have a huge responsibility or kuleana in all of this. And it is for us to know ourselves and to figure out in our life how we're gonna be in thrive mode, even if the outside world tells us we're in survival mode. Because either way, both of those are, you make a decision of how you want to live. And I choose to thrive, not to survive. And it is a conscious choice we make. With every breath that we take, we have the possibility and the opportunity to recreate our reality. And notice that breath is connected again to the lungs and to COVID and to everything. And you know, breathing, and I learned this from Dr. Yi, she's a midwife. Breathing is of the utmost importance, not just when you're giving birth, just breathing, period, because breathing allows us to be present. You know, that's why so many people, they get the yoga, but then whether they're thinking along these lines or not doesn't make a difference, but they feel really good because they are coming into a place where now they are consciously present, whereas the majority of the time we're not present. And so when we focus on our breathing, it's really hard to focus on your breathing and to try to think of anything else or solve the problems of the world. When it's time to breathe, you hanu and you ha, right? And that in itself is moving energy. And the vibration that we carry, that's the vibration that we're putting out and that we're carrying. And so we determine that vibration. And you can do it, you know, in between your breaths as you live out your life. But these are the things that to me have come to light with COVID. So, you know, I understand the fear, I understand, but we all know that, you know, the lack in a world of abundance, you know, that's another thing. It's understanding, do we really lack? When we feel we lack, are we really lacking something inside, or are we just lacking the things on the outside? You know, like when you couldn't get into Costco and now nobody, don't want to go into Costco. Now everybody's back into Costco. It's like the fear that came out of that was for a lack on the outside of external things. And yet if you're able to maintain your internal, then it will balance out that lack on the outside.
Do you have do you have like specific things that you would recommend for just people in general to do that can, you know, that can fortify, that can protect, that can elevate, you know, our vibration, like how, you know, as you were saying a few minutes ago, that you know, how we hold ourselves, the vibration that we try to maintain in ourselves will have a direct impact on what physically is able to like penetrate our bodies, like in a very literal way, whether or not a virus can survive in the environment that you've created in yourself. What sorts of things that you think are the most important and the most powerful for doing that work?
To breathe. Conscientious breathing, you know, and people, it's so funny, everybody's so busy, right, during this time of COVID in the beginning.
I know,
you know,
more busy. I feel like more busy than I ever was.
And I think it's because we're, you know, we're dealing with so many things, but breathing, make it a point to breathe, you know. Even if it's only when you're in the bathroom, only when you're in the shower, do it when you wake up, do it just before you go to bed. Even if it's just 3 breaths here, 4 breaths here, do it on a commercial if you're watching TV. Do it before you eat, do it after you eat. And see, for me, that breath also takes the form of pule, a prayer. And you know, pule loosely translated is prayer, but it's a little bit more than that, because my understanding is a vibration that you can hold. And the other thing is for us to, again, to be in the awareness of thrive. Make yourself happy, you know. If your kids are always in school and you're always at work and they go to A plus and they have a zillion activities, you're not used to having that one-on-one relationship with your child, and neither are they. And so it's very unrealistic to expect that all of a sudden you're going to do that. And yet, as a parent, you know, we are the ones who control. Do we create circumstances where we can grow into that and begin to have that relationship and feel good about it? But you got to give it to a kid in small doses. Kids who are now, they're addicted to their devices. If you try to make them have, quote, all of a sudden, family time. Maybe family time can even consist of doing some kind of weird techie video game together. I mean, I know my son plays with people halfway around the world, and, you know, maybe within a family you can do something like that, you know. But then there are all those other little things. You know, what are your memories? What is your memories of quality time? You know, for me, it's very meaningful that when I get inspired or somebody's name comes up all of a sudden, even if I haven't seen them in years, to go call them or text them or shoot them an email and just say, I'm just checking in on you. Are you okay? Do you need anything? Is everything okay? That kind of interaction and connection is gonna help us. It is gonna help increase our vibration. You know, because again, here we go. Another topic for another talk, but yo soy tú mismo. I am you and you are me. And if we are thinking in that mode, then we are acknowledging the abundance within and without, and not the lack of. So I think those things are good. The other thing is to get enough sleep, you know, be creative. Yeah. You know,
I need to take my own advice.
Oh, tell me about it. You know, I'm up like since 4:44 in the morning, right? And I don't go to bed till midnight, and then like I pass out like I just did before. But you know, it's kind of, I'm trying to find a new routine. That's why. But you know, take pleasure in the little things that you're being given time to do. But know that it is a time to turn inward. Know that the light will be shed on the things that you most don't want to deal with. That sooner or later you're going to have to deal with it. And that humanity will continue forward independent of your personal choice. And that's why, again, you know, we know that in times such as these, there have been mass exodus of souls from this planet. And sometimes it's because, oh, that's all they needed to be here. Makao kauloa, they are ready now to move on. Other times it's because they already cannot coexist with the vibration of the planet. You know, it might not seem like it because we think, oh, there's so much pollution and all the environmental impacts. But Mother Earth, she is cleansing herself. She is preparing to make this jump into a higher vibration. And you know, this is just a wave that's washing up on the shore, kai miki, kai kaha, and then that wash back out. And we need to go with the flow, but we need to breathe and be aware. We cannot claim ignorance. Our kuleana is to know, and our kuleana is to be conscientious about it.
Yeah,
but
and I think it's like good. It's like that a good, you know, each of the things that you were talking about, like it's a blend of like being self-reliant and self-responsible, but then also recognizing that, you know, it's not reinforcing the idea of, you know, the culture of individualism and, you know, that sort of thing. It's like it's being self-reliant and self-aware, but still in community. Like that's the forever balance, right, for humanity, is, you know, our desire to be, you know, independent, but then also our very real need to be in connection with other people and be building together. So I like that a lot. And then
Yeah,
even
well, you know, that's why it's so interesting that this being rebirth into unity. Our understanding of unity up to now has been, okay, everybody's equal, everybody's the same. And this birth is going to be the most diverse in history. And it's the 5 million piece jigsaw puzzle, you know? Everyone is different, and yet they all fit together. And, you know, we just need to know we're a piece. Some people, their destiny will take them to be the corner piece or the edge, you know? I can just be one of those green pieces over there in the corner. But I know that I'm a piece, and so I'm good. And, you know, self-reliance is what allows us to reach out to the next person. If we're in crisis, we can't help the other person. So it's up to us to be resilient, to be self-reliant, to be aware, and to take care of ourselves the best that we can, so that we can reach out to others. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And it, you know, and it makes me think too, I'm trying to remember where I had heard this from, but I remember listening to somebody a few weeks ago talking about, you know, the lessons of this time too, and described it as, you know, us really processing individually, collectively, our mommy and daddy issues. And that, you know, the things that we didn't get from our parents, the things that, you know, the things that we feel we're missing, you know, now is the time for us to like really work through that and figure out, you know, there's nothing that we can do about the past. There's nothing that we can do to change, you know, the environment that we were born into. But, you know, certainly as adults, or, you know, young adults, old adults, middle adults, you know, us as adults, like at a certain point, we have to decide like what we're going to do with that. If we're just going to, you know, if we're going to take responsibility for giving ourselves what we didn't get growing up, because now we're capable. Now we have capacity. We have varying, you know, degrees of capacity at any given time, because we're all, you know, weaving in and out, you know, of our lives in our own ways. But, you know, but that's still like, we still have the power to do that. And so, yeah, I just kind of, that just popped into my mind that like,
yeah,
yeah,
we do, but I wanna kind of preclude that by saying it's hard.
It's hard. It's
hard work. It's hard work, and you know, a lot of people, I mean, look at today's society, it comes a little hard and nobody wants to do it. You gotta want to embrace the hard work to make it happen. Because what it is, it's those emotions that are tied to our whatever it is that we thought that we lacked. Right? It's again, it's that sense of loss. It's that sense of lack. When we know that there is more than abundance in the universe. And so, you know, there's a lot that we have on our plate. We all do. And for some people, even just, they're just going to try to just do that, and it's going to be overwhelming. And so whenever anything like that happens, what do? You freeze in your tracks and you breathe. That is the fastest way to be in sync and to be in harmony with the universe, is to breathe. And if you have to breathe and cry, that's fine too. But breathe. See, even when you're crying, you're going to have to stop in order to breathe. So that's good. But really, if you want to know what to do, and that might sound really simplistic to people, like, yeah, like that's going to solve anything. It's going to begin to how do you say that in English? Fortalecer. To
fortify.
Yes, to fortify you internally. If you can stop and breathe when you're at those emotional moments. And you might not see an immediate result, but that is where your strengthening comes in. The discipline.
It's so underrated. Yeah.
Like
It's so
Halimako said.
underrated.
Yeah.
It's underrated. It's underrated. You know, it sounds cliche, you know, breathing and being present, and it has been kind of, you know, it's been popularized so much that it feels like it kind of doesn't mean anything in a way, I think, for a lot of people. But, you know, but even for myself, like that, you know, it's so easy to fall off that practice and to feel, and I notice in myself too. I mean, even today, even this morning, I'm trying to do the morning oli, and, you know, and I'm like, even just the first part where it's like, okay, honu, ha, and I feel the tension, I feel the resistance, and it's not, you know, it's not, it seems like such a small thing, but like, you know, there's moments where even if I just have like a little moment of holding that point of resistance where I'm trying to breathe or trying to breathe in or breathe out, I start crying. I start crying. I feel like I kind of embarrass myself nowadays because I just start crying, for, you know, out of nowhere. But I know that I know that's my ancestors present with me, and I know that, like, we're working on stuff, like, together, and, you know, collectively, and I feel honored that, you know, that I personally have the privilege to, you know, where people like you and, you know, other people in my life are constantly reminding of these little things that really do add up to, you know, to something bigger. And yeah, I just gotta keep myself, you know, keep myself in that.
Crying is good. Okay,
Yeah.
so number one is when things get really bad is that you breathe. You stop and you breathe. So you breathe in, you hold, and you breathe out. Number two, and my kids would tell you about this, drink water.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of
It
which,
doesn't have to be fancy water. It doesn't have to be even alkaline water. You need to just drink water. Because that's who we are. We are the two waters. Yeah.
mm-hmm.
And if you cry, you better intake some more water. And if you're upset, that usually means that you're hot under the collar. It means your temperature went up. It means the rate of transpiration, evaporation has increased. You're getting dehydrated faster than normal. Drink water. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you're sick, drink water. If you're healthy, drink water. If you're going to exercise, drink water before, drink water after. And it's because of the water, which is another talk. But, you know, those would, if you said, what are the two things that people can do? It's the breathing and the drinking of water. If you can do that diligently, those two things will guide your mental and your emotional process into a place, even though you might think that nothing's happening. Mm-hmm. And this is where the trust comes in. This is where you have to trust. You can trust in a higher power, or you can trust in yourself. And, you know, when I talk about trusting in yourself, a lot of people, they think it's like it's a self-serving, self-centered thing. And it's not. It's simply acknowledging the divine within. Mm. Yeah. Mm. How can we acknowledge the divine outside of us if we don't acknowledge the divine inside? If we don't know it firsthand, how can we recognize it somewhere out there? And the answer is that we cannot. And so those two things, breathe and drink water, I think if I had to give two bits of advice, those would be the ones. Mm-hmm. Okay. Is our time about up? I think we're going on and on. People are going to get tired.
So I've just been kind of looking to make sure that we touched on everything that we wanted to, at least in this, you know, kind of introductory talk. And so, you know, just any sort of, you know, last thoughts or, you know, ideas to leave people with about, you know, this time where, you know, as dark as it may seem for a lot of people, and is, like, people's realities are being, you know, shattered. There's a lot of loss and a lot of grief, but, you know, but also, you know, an opening still yet for something good to come in and some light to come in, and how we can this is a time to ground ourselves, not just in the physical, but also in the emotional, spiritual, because there's something to be learned from all of this, good and bad. So yeah, any final thoughts or anything that we didn't have a chance to get to that you really wanted to add?
Well, now that you brought up about light and dark, is like, we need to stop associating dark with negative things.
Mm.
The night shines just as brightly as the daytime, and the
Mm.
pull and the darkness is just as powerful as the daytime, if not more, because the pull encompasses everything. The dark, and and the word darkness does not suffice for our word pull in Hawaiian, but we need to stop seeing things from a negative point of view, and even on the most
duality.
Understanding that the dualities are not you choose one or the other. You embrace the two together and get the fullness of understanding. Because until we do, we won't have a full understanding. We'll have a partial understanding. And those partial understandings is what drives us into chaos and into fear and all of those negative emotions. So one way you can counteract that too is just do something extra nice to somebody. Just reach out to one person today. Or when you're in your worst crisis, find an opportunity to serve somebody else. Because that will automatically bring back balance. Again, it's that understanding that there are dualities, and the balance is embracing the whole, not just one and giving up on the other. That's why we're kind of out of balance.
Yeah. And there's a spectrum in between these two, the two polarities. Like all of it matters. All of that matters.
All the gray matter.
all the gray matter matters. So I think we should we can close this introductory conversation here, and then there'll be plenty more opportunities to kind of dive deeper into some of those things, and then whatever comments or questions that come up from people watching the video too, we can use as jumping off points to kind of dive into things that are of interest to others too. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm glad we have this.
Thank you so much, Emilia, for this opportunity. I listen to all these things and I'm like, okay, no, yes, okay, I need to go talk about COVID.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for this opportunity. I hope that the things that have been brought out, that it helps people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's my hope. So I'm happy to do what I can too. So yeah, so we'll leave it here, and then we'll see everybody on the next video.
Okay, ahui ho.
Yeah.